So we're back. Is President Trump mapping out a larger strategy when he takes to Twitter and goes on the attack, particularly when going after people of color like me and LeBron James? So let's bring in now senior political commentator Charles Blow, an op-ed columnist with the New York Times, political commentator Steve Cortez, a former Trump campaign advisor, and Annie Carney, the White House reporter for Politico. Good evening. I'm so glad that you all could join us this evening. Steve, I'm going to start with you because you sent me a note. Thank you very much for that. And you told me that the White House you said that the president's tweet was wrong, and you told the White House.
I do, and I do believe that. I think it was a mistake to go after LeBron James. Look, I'd love to be as dumb as LeBron James, if that's dumb, because he's not only the greatest athlete in the world, in my opinion, he's also an incredible businessman, and he has a great heart, and he's doing terrific things for at-risk children in Eastern Ohio, and not just writing a check, that would be enough, but also being deeply involved in curriculum. And whenever I hear him interviewed, whenever I read about him, the last thing I think of is dumb. My advice to the president, who I have, as you know, great respect for, my advice to him is that he should follow his wife's lead. I thought she made a wonderful statement, the First Lady did, about LeBron. We can praise the great work he's doing there. We can ignore the fact that he personally doesn't care for the president. And I encourage the president, like Melania did, to reach out to him. I think that would prove a lot to the country and say that we care about the great things you're doing. Who cares if we have political differences? You're not a political person, by the way. You're a private citizen. And how can we learn from each other in that regard? I hope the president will do that. I'm very glad the First Lady did.
Well, I am a private citizen, but I didn't run for office, but I am a public figure here, so I take the criticism. The President of the United States should be better and should do better and should not be tweeting bad things about NBA stars or cable news anchors. It's just beneath the office of the presidency, and he should learn that. So I want to bring Charles in. Charles, this is from your latest column. It's a good column, by the way. Thank you so much for writing that. Donald Trump has a penchant for labeling particular people. It might strike some as just another insult for a petulant urchin of a man who insults everyone with whom he takes issue. But I believe that the nature of his insults to specific kinds of people says something more about the character and the nature of the man, something of which he may or may not be aware. I believe that the fact that he so often attacks the intellectual capacity of women and minorities exposes a racial and gender bias, one that has a long history and a wide acceptance. So he disses everybody. Right. But you think there's a pattern when it comes to
Absolutely. So the New York Times has done a great job of keeping track of literally every insult that he's issued, right? And so I went through that database and just trying to see what patterns emerged from that. And so there are political opponents, and so they caught a lot of the grief, and he would say a lot of things about them. And people who would disagree with him on specific policies, and he'd attack that person because of that. But only with minorities and women did he use them as tools of division, right? So these were not his political enemies. They had no impact on policy. These were just people who disagree with him. And he would, in many cases, some people had differences on policy. So, Elizabeth Warren, he uses her as a tool, right? She's not involved with him on a policy issue all the time. He just wants to say the word Pocahontas, right? He just wants to use Maxine. There are a lot of congressmen, Democratic congressmen, who vehemently disagree with this president, are on television all the time saying how much they disagree with him, senators too. He does not use them. He chose the black woman and said, this is their new hero, which is a lie, right? Maxine, she's a prominent person, but nobody's saying that Maxine is the face of the party. But he wants to make her that because it is useful to him, because it is a weapon and it is a tool, right?
Just say it, because of his...
Because it's race. It's race and it's misogyny as well, though, because he likes the idea of using her. And that happens over and over in his insulting. He will pick someone. He'll pick Kaepernick. He will pick, an athlete like LeBron. He'll pick you. But he wants to find a face. And he likes the fact that that face is female or minority. Mm-hmm. And it's easier to beat up on them in his mind.
Annie, the timing of this tweet from the president comes just about a year after Charlottesville. And in your latest piece for Politico, you write about the real lesson President Trump learned from that episode. Ultimately, with his loyal voters and Republicans at large, he came out unscathed, right?
In the short term, absolutely. We saw a year ago Republicans on the Hill distancing themselves from him. We saw corporate executives quitting his business councils. We saw a lot of hemming and hawing among White House staffers about whether or not they would leave the administration, and people like Gary Cohn, his former top economic advisor, privately expressing consternation. A year later, everyone has sort of crawled back in one way or the other. The Republicans on the Hill are behind him for the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh and tax reform. The corporate CEOs are having dinner privately at Ivanka and Jared's house or at the White House, just not on the business council, and no one quit. So I think the short-term lesson, and I'm talking 1 year as a short term, is that nothing matters. It's the I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue principle. His poll numbers are at a high of his presidency. His Fox News crew is still behind him. The question is, do these things add up in an aggregate? And from a historical perspective, will this put him on the wrong side of history? That is a question that we will find out later. But a year later, he's doing just fine.
Mm-hmm. Steve, I wanted to make sure everyone
Charles,
got in. I know you wanted to respond. Go on.
Right. Charles, to your point, I think that's patently unfair, and the facts don't bear it out. I don't like the criticism of LeBron James. I don't believe.
Keep going.
Okay. I don't believe that it's at all racial, and here's why.
You don't believe that means
because
opinion.
dumb
Go ahead.
Because no, here's why. Here, I'm about to give you facts, Don. Here are facts of some of the people
that wasn't me.
he
That
has
was
called
Charles.
dumb.
It was me.
That was Charles.
Okay, sorry, Charles.
Yeah.
Sorry, Charles. Here are some of the facts. People he has called dumb. People like Mitt Romney. It doesn't get much more white and establishment
opponent.
than.
Go ahead. Like I said, political opponents. Right. Go ahead. Keep going.
How about the way he criticizes people like Chuck Todd and Joe Scarborough?
Right.
Fine. If you want to go into the realm of media.
Going.
So white men are very frequently the targets of really serious barbs from this president. He does not seem to hold back regardless of gender or ethnicity at all. And in all those cases, by the way, I'll also defend him on this again. I don't think you should go after LeBron because he's not in politics. In all of the other cases, these are people who come at him first. If you first call the president a racist, which is totally unfounded, he is going to counterpunch and probably punch back harder than you gave it to him in the first place. He's the Floyd Mayweather of politics. It has served him well. He counterpunches against media, against political opponents. I don't want him doing it against people who aren't in the arena, but he does it incredibly well, and he does it without discrimination as regards to gender and race.
Okay, listen, hold on, Charles. I'm letting you respond. I just want to say,
that's a lie.
You're going to get in,
right.
But I didn't attack him. I didn't say I was interviewing LeBron James. He chose to attack me. That wasn't a counterpunch.
Exactly.
You didn't that night, but Don, you have called him a racist. I would say half the times I've watched your show, you've called him a racist. So don't say that's not a punch. That is a punch to the throat of the president, and he counterpunches back at you, and I think that's totally fair.
A statement of fact is not an attack. Really? I gave you all the evidence. How much more evidence do you need? How much more evidence do you need? Being a racist does not mean walking down the street calling people the N-word. It is what you do, your practice. It is what you say. It is how you treat people. It is who you hang out with. It is what comes out of your mouth.
Right.
It's not active like, oh my gosh, you catch someone in the act being racist. You judge people on their lives, on their action. And that's what I've judged from the facts. I know that this administration and the supporters are fact challenged, but all you have to do is look at the facts.
Yes, you are.
On his actions, he has done nothing but make life better for those of us in minority communities.
It stitches together a whole bunch of things that are not related to each other and tries to get around the actual facts that we put on the table, right? It is a fact. And you tried to get around this and say that it was not true, and that's what you do. I've seen you on television a million times, and you do this thing, and it's kind of clever, but it's not clever with me, right? The idea that he uses particular people as weapons, as clubs, when he goes to his rallies, that he constantly comes back, and this has been reported out, that he thought that him attacking those kneeling NFL players played well politically for him. So he used them. They weren't constantly coming at him, which is the lie you just told.
They never mentioned the president.
That's another lie he told, right? But y'all let him come in here and lie. So I'm just
who wasn't coming at him?
He keeps coming back at them because it works for him, because those people in those audiences look at them and those brown faces on those men who are kneeling to protect and defend the lives of other black and brown boys and men who have been shot by the police, and doing so, quite frankly, in one of the most peaceful ways you could possibly do it. Not even saying a word, just going down on a knee. It is literally one of the most peaceful ways to protest you could ever think of. But he knows that the people in those audiences don't see that. They see black men being disobedient. And that is what he is using. So you can
Charles,
now to give him a
this is
chance
a
to he'll
brown
twist that
face.
around and tell another lie on TV, which is what he does.
Okay,
Go
will you
for it,
stop
man.
calling me a liar?
Yeah, I'm
Stop calling
going
me a
to keep
liar.
doing that
Look,
because
this
you
is
are. And you lie all the time. And it is very apparent to anybody who's watching, and I watch.
Let him say his piece.
Go for it. I want to hear it.
This is a brown face. This is a brown face, by the way, who appreciates very much what this president is doing for my community and for communities of color in this country who are more prosperous and more secure than they have been. And, by the way, a brown face that is sick of being taken for granted by liberals who want to keep minorities in a political plantation where they are dependent on government and where their views are only respected at election time. And that, I believe, is real racism.
That is also a racial dog whistle, right? They constantly use
it's not a dog whistle. I'm saying the Democrats want that mentality.
White Republicans don't never use the plantation. Only black and brown Republicans use the plantation metaphor because they can get away with doing it, right? And it's a dog whistle to the white people. Like, that's right, I would like to say that, but they would call me racist. So thank you, black and brown person, for doing it for me. Keep going, because this is very instructional.
No, my point is that
listen,
Democrats
why don't we take a break
want
here?
to keep minorities
Why don't we
there,
take a break
not
here?
the
I do have to say,
Republicans want.
Steve, I'm going to let you talk on the other side. There is a difference between, a huge difference that America needs to understand about people who perceive themselves to be forgotten because of political strategy or because of politics or because someone is trying to use them in the vote. There's a difference between that and people who have been historically forgotten about and discriminated against. There's a huge difference in that. One is a perception, the other is a reality.